Buenas tardes, good afternoon. Thank you for coming back from coffee break to hear what I have to say. And thank you so much for the Cobion Media team and the whole conference for having me here. I'm down from North Carolina and really excited to be here in Puerto Rico to share these ideas. I often start presentations by talking about things like this. So a grocery store is actually a place of social isolation. You're there surrounded by people, surrounded by food, but not really interacting much. It's also a place where we're not invited to learn about where food comes from. Often you go to a grocery store as a sense of abundance, but not a sense of where things come from. We're not encouraged to be informed consumers in a grocery store, really. Or sometimes I'll start with this, which is about how design thinking and food systems need to connect if healthy communities are what we're after. And this quote actually gave me permission to stop being an architect and start being a food system designer. Or I'll start with a picture like this, because as a design thinker, any familiar object is actually a key to a systems conversation. So a chicken, what does it eat? Where does its manure go? How many chickens does it take to employ one person? The chicken itself, if you ask questions, leads you to a whole system. But these are all questions about food systems, and that's how I usually start a talk. Today I thought I'd start by talking about myself and sort of where I came from and why I do what I do. So I was a little kid in a progressive southern town. I don't know, I was like a little kid. And I want to talk about my parents. My mom raised myself and my two brothers, but she went back to graduate school when we were all into junior high school. And she got a master's degree, and then she went on to work in public health, and she wrote a cancer control plan for North Carolina, which changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people and was a groundbreaking document in the United States. And she taught me that it's never too late to make a difference. She also taught me through all of her actions that every single person, no matter their color, their sexual orientation, and this is in the 70s and 80s, their color, their sexual orientation, anything, every single person deserves our respect, our empathy, and our compassion. And she saw that to us every day. I had three brothers, and as the middle child, so I was the middle number one, I was the larger number one here. As the middle child, I was always looking for ways to resolve differences, to always bring people together, always to smooth things out. And that's still what I'm doing now, and hopefully that comes through. I also grew up around farms. My grandparents had a cattle farm. This is a picture there. My other grandparents had a big apple orchard in Massachusetts. And in high school, I was the on-site farm manager for a summer camp in Western North Carolina. And then I went to college. I studied biology, did a little bit of public health out of college, got into restaurants. I was a cook and a chef for about 5 years all across the country. Got into carpentry, construction, and then into architecture. And I worked in Boston for a great architecture firm doing projects like this one for about 5 years, and then found my way back to North Carolina and got a master's degree in architecture at NC State University. But food never left kind of my spirit or my thinking. I did an independent study one summer on restaurant kitchens. I studied 6 James Beard-winning restaurants, the kitchens, so from inside out. What are the spaces? What's the food like? How do people work in kitchens? And for my master's thesis, I actually studied 2 square miles of very low-income neighborhoods in Durham, North Carolina, which is in the middle of the state. And here is where I really started to see the opportunity to not be an architect and instead be a food system something, to bring design thinking to food systems. Because the problems in food systems are really urgent. Imagine you live in a neighborhood and this is your food source. Right? This is where you shop to feed your family. That's not uncommon in the food desert areas in North Carolina and across the country. Food system problems are incredibly urgent, incredibly challenging. Designers are not coming to food system problems often enough. And I'll tell you more about sort of how I see food systems as I go. So when I decided to say that I'm a food system designer, not an architect, one of the discoveries that really propelled me forward was that people are not part of food systems, not nearly enough. And what I mean by that is that people aren't owning businesses and food systems enough. People aren't growing enough of their own food. People aren't making informed decisions enough. We've been given generations of this. How can we have higher, more convenient food cheaper food, more processed food. And that means that we're forgetting, generation by generation, forgetting how to cook. We're forgetting how to shop for whole food. We're forgetting how to grow our own food. And so things like this have led to some serious problems. Our diets are actually killing us. We thought smoking was a big deal, but our diets are. And as Americans, we're not making good dietary choices, partly because we don't know how to make good dietary choices anymore. We're getting too disconnected from our food. And at the same time, the food system, the big food system, is having a concentration of corporate control. Now, I'm all for private industry. I'm all for private businesses, and I think that corporate engagement in the food system has led to some really remarkable revolutionary things. But as control consolidates, what that means is there's less opportunities for people to participate as other than consumers. Corporations just aren't interested in it. And this consolidation happens not just with consumer goods, but throughout the food system, from seed supply all the way through. And another big piece where people are left out of food system opportunities are really around race. And this idea deserves a weekend worth of conference, not just the 30 seconds that I'll spend on it. It's a deep-seated idea. It's an uncomfortable idea. And it's a really complicated one. When the color of your skin in America dictates your access to healthy food, the opportunity for you to build wealth over your lifetime, the opportunity for you to get education, when the color of your skin dictates those things, and in the food system it happens throughout the food system, that's a problem. And that's something that needs to be solved. Access to land, access to loans, being able to walk into a grocery store. I can walk into a grocery store and talk to a manager, and the manager will take me seriously. But many people of color or indigenous people could walk into that same grocery store and not be taken seriously initially. They won't be seen as sort of real business people or real partners. There's a difference, and that difference needs to be addressed. And that's through the whole food system, right? And I used to think the food system was really, if you asked me 10 years ago or 15 years ago what the food system was, I might say, well, this is it. It's a farmer's market. There's customers, and they talk to a farmer, and they buy some fresh produce. That seems like a food system, right? Well, since then, since I really started to get into this work, food systems have become much, much more complicated. And then we've spent a lot of time trying to simplify them back down. And so a food system, in its most simple, I think can look like this. With five key parts. There's food production, food processing, distribution, consumption, and then this whole food waste and recovery part. Now, there's a few things I want to talk about using this. The first thing I want to talk about is how dollars move. Dollars typically move from the consumption area, where we purchase food as consumers, and then slowly kind of works its way back. Eventually, some of it gets to farmers. And you can see that part of that circle is left out. There were some presentations earlier today talking about how to take advantage of that. There's huge dollars available there if we figure out how to do it, but right now it's not really a circular economic situation. We can also look at the kinds of enterprises that occupy this food system. A conventional or mainstream or industrial food system has really big businesses involved, right? So the green dots represent these really big businesses. It's a global food system, 10,000-acre farms, massive shipping companies, huge global conglomerates of wholesalers and food retailers. They're big industries. And what that means is it's actually a pretty fragile system, right? If the relationships among those things go down for political reasons or climate reasons or any number of things, this system is not set up for resilience. And the system, when you look at it from a different standpoint, is also really out of balance. If you look at where the people are in the food system, most of the people, probably 95, 98%, are treated as consumers and encouraged to be consumers, and not encouraged to ask too many questions about what's going on in the rest of the system. They're not given the opportunity for ownership. They're not given the opportunity to learn and really take put an informed stake in any of this stuff. And so what that means is that if you remember that dollar sort of flow, the food system is really taking dollars from all those people and moving it through kind of the source of production without regenerating anything. And here's one of the big things that kind of has defined the work that I do, is that a main goal is to move from this picture to that picture. Giving people an opportunity to own small businesses, giving people an opportunity to grow their own food, giving people opportunity to create ecosystems of food so that they can actually participate in this means that they will know more, they'll learn more, they'll make better healthcare decisions on their own, they'll make better dietary decisions, and the opportunity for community economic development really starts to take off because the small businesses that look like this are by definition going to be more localized. They're not going to be serving the world, they're going to be serving their neighborhood or their town or their county or their region. And that's going to build a local food system with more interrelationships among people, which means a more resilient system where dollars are staying local. You guys with me on that? Okay. So the next is actually discovery 2, not 3. That this starts to look like a grassroots system, right? Kind of community, kind of grassroots community organizing. Let's get all these small things started and spark a lot of cool stuff at the grassroots level. Well, the grassroots action alone won't solve our food system problems, right? Because grassroots action by its nature is decentralized. It's not usually well coordinated. You could have 3 or 4 things that are the same happening really close to each other that don't know about each other. And so they're not actually built for scale, they're not actually built for lasting impact. And so if the grassroots energy will be sustained, if this is part of the answer, it needs to be combined with the large scale also, because we do have millions of people we need to feed. And stopping our industrial food system today and restarting it with something else tomorrow is not realistic. There needs to be a shift to a more localized system. But even then, I would never argue that a fully localized grassroots system is the way to go. There needs to be a balance. We need to have, honestly, big dollars that are pushing new research agendas. There need to be big dollars pushing new innovations. That needs to be part of the mix, but we also need the small local solutions as well. But to keep all this working, there needs to be a level of coordination. There needs to be the next level up, where all the amazing things that are coming up, and I'm feeling it in this room today, like so many amazing ideas and energies are just around in this room today and happening on this island, but how then do they start to work together in a coordinated fashion so that local government knows how to invest, nonprofit funders know how to invest, farmers know where to fit in, institutions, other wholesale buyers know how to expand their markets and know how to grow what they're doing, and all the pieces of the value chain in between can get developed so that you build demand, you build the agricultural production at the same time to match it, and you build the supply chains in between, so you actually are building the system which needs coordination through planning, through shared development, through policy. And one example of that, and obviously what's going on here is an unbelievable example of that, and you've heard so many examples today. But in Oregon, there's a project called Gorge Grown, and they started by coordinating 2 or 3 farmers markets. And now they've grown into coordinating, I think, almost a dozen farmers markets in the middle of Oregon. They also have a shared kitchen. They have some commercial kitchen space, some community kitchen space. They have educational programs. They're doing that connective work to try to build those opportunities, building demand and production capacity, supply capacity at the same time, and filling the gaps. Another example is in South Carolina, where a single food hub is actually started by a land conservation group called Grow Food Carolina in Charleston. They saw farming as an important part of land conservation, so they started a food hub to support the farmers, to support land conservation. And now they've been helping advocate for a system of food hubs. They said, we don't need our food hub to get bigger. We need our food hub to have brothers and sisters throughout South Carolina. So if one has too much okra or too many tomatoes, they can slide those to one of the other ones. They can share information and become a learning community. And they can have the right size food hubs that are networked together. And then in Raleigh, in Community Food Lab, which is my company, we're asking some big questions about what regional food planning might look like. If you took a municipal area with a big population and combined it with the rural areas around it where food production is a big part of the culture and opportunities, how do the urban areas and the rural areas support each other? And we asked, what if the triangle, so Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill, which by the year 2020 by the year 2040, we'll have 2.25 million people spending about $600 a month on food per person. So it's billions of dollars we're spending on food. How do we take 40% of that spending and move it to the rural areas around the triangle? What if the billions of dollars had an easy way to get to the rural communities in North Carolina that honestly are economically impoverished? I've heard it today in some conversations that Puerto Rico is losing its youth, that people are leaving Puerto Rico and losing population. Rural North Carolina is the same way. High school students graduate and just never look back. There are no opportunities for them in small town North Carolina. Towns are hollowing out. They're losing their energy. They're losing their population because the economic opportunities aren't there for the young people. And so if we could rebuild that small town using agriculture as the starting point for an economic development program, small towns across North Carolina could benefit. And the main idea is that a municipal area would look initially to a radius around it for its food. And so from Atlanta to Washington, D.C., you can imagine what that might look like initially. You just draw a 100-mile circle around each one. Like, okay, this is a starting point. And this is where sort of the Raleigh-Durham circle would be for the triangle. And then zooming in on that, the triangle is up there, and more considerations come into play. What are the political boundaries? How do you get sort of political groups, councils of government, county leaders, municipalities, all kind of bought in? What's the strategic kind of combination of the political sort of jurisdictions? What about the agricultural areas? How do you connect the agricultural areas with the population centers? How do you not compete with other municipalities for the same territory? How do you really think about designing a region to serve a city? And so that's one of the steps we're going through now, and it'll look kind of like this. And it'll combine relatively wealthy counties with very, very impoverished counties. It'll combine a number of different growing areas. There are two major soil types here, both agriculturally very productive, that run through this zone. And this kind of sort of thinking, pointing out to the future and saying, by 2040, we're going to hit a 40% target for the triangle. For any different place, that number might be different. But it sets a sort of an aspirational goal. The tangible first step, and we've got a steering committee put together. We're talking with councils of governments about getting federal money for a planning grant. But the tangible first step would be a 3 to 5 year regional agricultural economic development plan that sets out actions for all the different sectors that I mentioned before: local governments, nonprofits, farming sector, institutions, for-profit sector. All those different sectors would have plans laid out for them. And so that's sort of our next step in moving Project 40 forward. And really the idea is to say, there's different landscapes in North Carolina, and right now they're not working together, they're not even talking to one another. How do we build a tangible agenda for them to actually collaborate? And so, sort of to close, some principles of this work that we do is to enable and nurture grassroots community energy. That's where innovation comes from. You have to have participation to make any large-scale movement work, but you have to have the resources of a future-thinking, really tech-enabled movement to sustain the impact and to sustain the growth and sort of coordination of that grassroots energy. Think regionally. If you think about a food system, the logic of the food system is that there are people and there is production, and you have to have both when you think about a food system, and a region is the first size that really makes sense from a big scale. And build flexible plans. Things are going to change over time. Think about flexibility as you move forward. And then finally, it's really important to design and plan with and not for. And this is a hard thing. We're not experts at it yet. We have a lot to learn. But the people that will be impacted by your planning decisions need to have a seat at the table when you're getting started, so that whatever you put into your final document, they have a sense of ownership in, and they're ready to pick up and run with. And so the last idea I'll leave you with is this, again, that systems thinking matters, and finding the familiar thing that you can start interrogating and asking questions of and getting into a full picture of the system is really where you need to be headed. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll be around for questions.